We are back with the balance breakdown. It's time to put a little bit of balance back into your life. And UFC 290 is in the books, and it wasn't a very balanced event, man. It was all over the place. An event for the ages, Harry. Ridiculous, ridiculous. I try not to get, like, you know me, I'm a very excitable person. I'll shoot straight from the hip and speak some nonsense at the best of times due to my excitement and my passion and my love for mixed martial arts. And I let the dust settle, and I'm still thinking this, right? It might be one of the greatest pay-per-views I've ever seen of all time on Saturday night. With everything that was, going into this event, all the storylines that were on show, an excellent card on paper, but also a card that delivered on the night, which we don't always get. 4 sub-minute finishes, lots of shocks, lots of storylines, and a little bit of controversy. It wouldn't be a night of mixed martial arts without a little bit of controversy. But Harry, I'm sure you're just as enthusiastic about talking about this card as I am, but we come on here and we share our displeasure sometimes of some aspects of this sport. And it is tough at the best of times. But then you do have nights like Saturday night that give you the reminder of why you, number one, got in and you love this sport so much, because it can produce such great moments. It can produce such good storylines. And yes, it can produce bad ones. But Saturday night was an event for the ages, and it was a reminder of why we love mixed martial arts so much.
I think for me, UFC 290 shows you the capability of MMA. It shows you the capability of the UFC. It shows you the capability of elite level fighting, right? This card had absolutely everything you could want from an MMA spectacle in it. Now, you could argue that there was maybe one fight in Cruton Menafield that we maybe just didn't need to see because it didn't really give us anything. It didn't really show us, or we didn't learn anything massive in that fight. But every single other fight on this fight card had meaning. It had jeopardy. It was either somebody that was new to the UFC, but interesting, somebody we should take a note of. It was prospects that are undefeated. It's 21-year-old kids that are learning MMA. It's female fighters that are bursting onto the scene. It's brand new uber prospects in Bo Nickel. Then you've got the retirement fight of one of the biggest legends of MMA history. You've then got the banger alert in Turner and Hooker. You've then got Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis. And however that went, we were going to have a storyline coming out of it, because Israel had already said if Whittaker wins, he's going to fight him again and he wants to submit him. Fine. If Dricus wins, we already have the preconditioned beef, quote unquote, whatever bollocks that is, there already. Then you have Moreno and Pantoja. In my opinion, top 3 greatest fights of all time that I've ever seen. And then you've got Alexander Volkanovski, the greatest fighter in MMA history, against Yair Rodriguez. And we had every single possible thing you could want from an MMA fight card. It was absolute dreamland. Now, there is one criticism that I will make, and that's not of the night itself, because nothing on the night itself has come out, to be negative in our enjoyment of the fights. My issue is what's been released today or yesterday about Alexander Pantoja.
I'll definitely spend some time. There's 3. I want to try and keep this mainly positive, because I feel it was mainly a positive night for the UFC, but we are going to talk about Pantoja and what's happened today. We're going to talk a little bit about the so-called controversy around the Moreno Pantoja fight when it comes to the scoring. And also we'll talk a little bit about maybe the aftermath of the du Plessis and Whittaker fight. But we will kick things off in the main event in the featherweight division, and that was Alexander Volkanovski, who went in and took on Yair Rodriguez. Harry, in the preview show, we had discussed avenues that both of these gentlemen could win. And the avenues that we discussed about for Alexander Volkanovski were basically him trying to move Yair on the back foot with his footwork and forward pressure to try and kind of nullify his kicking game. And it was also mentioned as well about his possible use of grappling, coming off that grapple heavy camp coming in against Islam as well. And we basically got to see the two of those tactics in the first minute of the fight. It was absolutely amazing to look at. And it's a testament to the fight IQ, the confidence, and just the overall greatness of Alexander Volkanovski, really. Please, sir, I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this fight.
I am going to do my best, but I can guarantee you, having watched this fight twice now, I am not going to do this justice. I don't think me going back and watching it twice is enough for me to pick up the nooks and crannies of everything that's happened here. However, let's just go round by round, right? So what do we know about Yair Rodriguez? Well, we know that when he gets that dexterous kicking rhythm going, he's a serious problem. And there were flashes of that. There were flashes in the second, there were flashes in the third. Alexander Volkanovski 110% respected the kicking game of Yair. And I think maybe in the second and the third, didn't get overzealous at all. I just think he invested so much and he realized that he was going to have to take some licks in order to get what he wanted from the fight. Now, Yair, I think, made some interesting adjustments in the second and third, and we can talk about that. But in the first round, immediately Volkanovski comes out and range baits. What I mean by range baits is he'll very quickly dart in, dart out, very quickly switch stances on sort of a penny, if you will, on like a really tight circle that makes Yair feel like he's closing distance when he's actually not, and will actually start to close off the angles with which Yair has to go. And you start to see it, right? Yair looks to pick up that right knee, looks to pick up the right knee, and immediately Alex has changed his stance. And well, the right knee doesn't matter anymore because the kick's not there. And so he has to bring it backwards. He has to take it away from himself just in case. And slowly by slowly, in circles and circles, Alexander Volkanovski pushes Yair Rodriguez back behind the back tram line. And it's just...
And I thought he might have got some of that from the Max Holloway fight, because Max Holloway tried to do that in spells and not as successfully, I don't think, as Volkanovski was able to do on Saturday night. But please continue.
So I think the reason, one, because Alexander Volkanovski's footwork patterns are just better than Max Holloway's. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's because Volkanovski is just harder to hit in that he's a bit smaller, he's a bit stockier. And whereas Max Holloway, there's just literally more real estate to strike, right? Big long arms, big legs, big torso. Volkanovski is very compact. His shoulders are right up by his ears, and so finding head kicks is hard. He wears his hands and his elbows tight, but kind of wide. So getting underneath those elbows and finding body kicks is really tough. And then his leg, like the cadence of his legs, the width of his legs, the stance of his legs, they go from wide to short to switch to wide to center to wide again. It's so hard to find where he is, right?
Yeah.
And the initial takedown is just gorgeous because he forces Yair to think that a kick is available, knows the kick is coming because he's already started to turn his body off center so that he has time to catch the kick, catches it. And then what does every fighter do? They immediately just pick the leg up and try and run their fighter to the mat. Volkanovski, being the smartest fighter that's around right now, immediately catches, holds it like a carpet, looks at Yair and starts to parry the left hand with his left hand, right? He's looking at the right hand of Yair to see whether a shot's coming, to see whether he's going to try a mad switch kick, just to read the situation. Yair, guess what? Throws a right hand. Alexander grabs it, ducks underneath it, turns it into a body lock and drops him. And just that alone, right? Forget everything else that's about to come in the grappling situations. Just that alone gives you an idea of the man's level, the man's understanding of fighting. Because it's not just because that's not his game, right? If his leg was picked up, he's not looking to throw right hands. Like he's looking to down block, he's looking to get underhooks, he's looking to sprawl out. But because he knows and reads situations and patterns so well, he manages to understand what Yair is going to do before he even does it. Or even
crazy.
It's just unbelievable.
And I mean, like, that was almost the beginning of the end. In my opinion, that was pretty much the end of the fight. Like, I had my mind made up. You know, we try and break down these fights, and sometimes we do a good job in what we did, and maybe in this fight, and sometimes we don't do a great job. And we'll talk about that with Robert Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis. But very, very hard to try and predict what's going to happen in the sport of mixed martial arts. But, you know, I'm a very good judgment of kind of, I call it the arc of a fight. I have a very good idea on how an arc of a fight is going to go, but just watching a couple of minutes, and the minute that takedown happened, I knew that that was what Volkanovski wanted to do as well. And I mean, I think there has to be a level of praise for Volkanovski too, for not letting his ego get in the way and wanting to stand and bang with him throughout this fight as well, which could have led to some problems. And you know, Yair did get off some good shots in the round 2 and also in round 3 as well. But I mean, just the overall brilliance of Volkanovski was on show here. And we said it in the preview show, Harry, like, we need to cherish this because he's not going to be around forever. And he's probably the highest performing mixed martial artist in the world right now. And it's an absolute pleasure to watch. The takedown happened, the control time on top for Volkanovski didn't just sit on top of him, Harry, sat down and ensured that he got off some damage, something that he probably wasn't as happy about coming out of the Islam fight, was not being able to kind of get off some damage in some of those grappling exchanges. And obviously he's not facing the grappler to the caliber of Islam Makhachev when he's in there, Yair Rodriguez, but he left nothing to waste when he got the fight down in the first round.
This is MMA. Right? Like this, I don't know how else to say it. This is MMA. Like, when we say things like it's a good thing that Alexander Volkanovski didn't let his ego get in the way, and Alexander Volkanovski is operating at a level where his ego is channeled into progression. His ego is channeled into showing the levels, right? And he's operating at such a higher cerebral level than almost all other fighters that it wouldn't shock me as that there is no such thing as stand and bang, because that's not the most effective route in fighting. That's not the most effective route that's in front of him. He could see almost immediately that there were takedowns available. And look, if in that first takedown, Yair had scrambled immediately back to his feet or stuffed the takedown, we would have seen potentially a different route. We would have seen what happened in the second round. We pushed him up against the fence and started using reverse broomsticks and dropping him that way into far, far, far more dominant positions, into crucifixes, these sorts of things. But in that first round, the thing that just blew me away was that everything was about as perfect as you would want from a fighter. What did you just start with? He got his forehead and he stuck it under the chin of Yair Rodriguez. Why does that matter? Well, if Yair can't move his head, he can't move his shoulders. If he can't move his shoulders, he can't get up. As soon as Yair started to try to deal with the upper body grips, what did Volkanovski do? He punched him in the face. And so Yair now has an initial upper body dilemma. And that's the head position's great. I can't move, which means I can't escape. The moment I try to differentiate that grip set, I'm going to get punched in the face. Well, now I'm taking damage. So what do? Well, I'm going to have to try and do both at one time, right? The moment that Yair tries to wrap up an arm of Volkanovski and move the head, Volkanovski starts dealing with the legs, immediately laces a butterfly hook in, starts to free his bottom leg. And Yair's like, oh, fuck, I've got to do jiu-jitsu again. And so he's immediately trying to lock down the half guard. Well, when he locks down the half guard, his attention is taken away from the overhook grips. Alexander limp arms his arm out, puts his head back in the fucking shoulder, and starts hammering away. And like that, this is MMA. It is positional control leading to effective damage. That is exactly what Alexander Volkanovski showed us in that first round in the grappling exchanges. Modern grappling.
And it was much of the same for the second round as well. I mean, he would have had the confidence of getting the takedown. Yair also had an extra thing to think about, you know, which also stifles his kind of kicking game as well. But there was one thing I was really, really disappointed with Yair Rodriguez is the lack of setup for his kicks. I don't believe he used his hands, or he was not allowed to use his hands maybe as much as he would have liked to set up his kicks. That also kind of boils down to the movement, the distance control. And, you know, even Volk, there's not, like, if someone swings wild and misses by this much, is not as impressive for me as someone who misses by this much. When the fist is just ever so missing your face and you're just moving out of the way of the kicks. And Volkanovski was doing that. I mean, he had Yair Rodriguez studied down to a T. I think the introduction of a guy like Blood Diamond, which was talked about in the UFC Countdown, was a good addition to, and it definitely worked in the positioning of Yair, or of Volkanovski, kind of getting away of all the attacks of Yair Rodriguez. Now, some attacks did get off, but none really did too much damage. I believe maybe only 2 or 3 shots. There was a big right hand that landed in the second round from Yair before the takedown happened. And I believe 1 or 2 kicks got off in the third round as well. But talk to me about the second round. It was really the same as what we seen in round 1, Harry, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I think the reason the hands weren't involved, right, is because Yair knows that if he lands a kick at the extremity of the range of motion, at the very end of the range of motion of his legs, Volkanovski is absolutely nowhere near him. Nowhere near him. And so I think Yair's double down on the kicking game comes from being panicked based on where he is in the octagon, right? When you're behind that first tram line, you know that you're just a couple of steps away from the cage. Well, if you're Yair Rodriguez, that is the last place you want to be in a mixed martial arts fight. And so if he's able to use the kicks and use the dexterity, he's going to be able to know how much range he has in front of him and whether he's landing or not landing. If he's at punching range, that means Alexander Volkanovski's in grappling range. That's not where he wants to be at all. And so I think a conscious decision was made to predominantly go with kicks, setup or no setup, because he knows that that's a more comfortable range for him to be in. Now, the brilliance of Volkanovski, I think, in the second round is that he took a couple of kicks in the first, on the arms, on the legs, on the shins, whatever. The second round, he started to actually move his body so that they missed. And I don't mean that in a he stepped out of the way. He would physically step to the side, or he would angle his body off so a front kick would miss. He'd angle his body off so the kick would just shave off the thigh. And that allowed Volkanovski to enter in, because there's a moment when that leg has to come back, right? And what Yair did perfectly and so brilliantly in a couple of those exchanges was he'd tap, and then before Alexander had time to come in, he'd have dropped the leg and kick again. And that's the things that caught Volkanovski, is because Volkanovski had made a read, and that read was the kick comes out, it has to come back. That's my chance to enter. And Yair, in fleeting moments, once or twice, was able to kick twice in very quick succession, and that allowed him some extra respect from Volkanovski. But when Volkanovski drove Yair to the cage, gets the body lock, Yair makes a big mistake by going for the switch too early. Volkanovski just heists him, takes his back immediately. And again, we are seeing just some beautiful MMA grappling. And I think actually Volkanovski made a point to do this. In the first round, he takes him down in the middle of the cage, right? And works in the middle of the cage to say, just so you know, you can't scoot that way because I'm going to keep you here. And just so you know, you can't get up. And then in the second round, he's like, I'm going to take you down against the cage, and I'm going to show you that I'm going to smush you here. That armbar setup is absolute garbage. I'm going to keep you here. I'm going to keep smashing you. These elbows are going to absolutely cut your face to pieces. And then when you do get up, because you're scrambling with loads of energy, I'm going to hit reverse broomsticks. I'm going to take away your base. I'm going to use truck hooks to lean all my weight on you. I'm going to make sure my hands are in the right position. I'm going to ride all the Granbies, and I'm just going to maul you. And
there was a minor error in round 1 that caused the cut over the eye of Volkanovski, where he left himself a little bit exposed, and it happens, but he didn't allow that to happen again after the fact. I mean, that's also the brilliance of Alex Volkanovski, in that, everybody makes mistakes, but he recognizes his mistakes and immediately corrects them in there, where we do see some fighters making mistakes. in the octagon stay making those mistakes, which ends up either them getting finished or losing the fight. But I mean, unbelievable from Volkanovski. I mean, I couldn't say, I mean, words can't describe it. Like you said, we're watching things we've never seen before. We're seeing just greatness in action. And you know, we encapsulated that in round 2. Round 3, which turned into probably the best round for Yair Rodriguez until he got finished. I mean, we were asking for him to open up. I wanted him to open up. He did open up and ended up getting punished. So I was actually giving out watching it. I was like, he needs to open up more. He's not opening up more. And then he was like, that's why he didn't open up more, because Volkanovski was just waiting for him to come in there and close the distance where he could. He tried with the overhand right probably a minute and a half before he knocked him out, or in round 2. And it just kind of really caught the chin on the shoulder of Yair Rodriguez. But eventually, when Yair Rodriguez pushed the pace, it landed flush, and it was the beginning of the end. He had Yair massively hurt before sending him down to the canvas and landing ground and pound to finish. Talk us through round 3 and the finishing sequence from your view, Larry.
Absolutely. So I just want to back onto what you said about Yair building up. Like, what Yair realized early, I think, is that Volkanovski was in gear 2, and he was just coasting along and coasting along and coasting along and coasting along. In that 3rd round, when Yair was like, well, I'm going to need to do something, because if I don't do anything, I'm going to have 3 more rounds of what I had in round 2. He's likely to finish me because it's really difficult to get up and he's landing a lot of damage down here. So it's either the ref is going to step in, he's going to finish me, or I'm going to have to do something to gain some more respect. And well, what does Yair Rodriguez do to gain respect? Well, he's going to try and kick you in the face. Like that's what he does. That's who he is as a person. That's who he is as a fighter. And so we see a really nice up kick again. We see a really nice, a couple of spinning kicks, a couple of flick attacks, a couple of jump roundhouse kicks. Like, he tries, right? He really tries. But Volkanovski then, when he gets caught by one of them, just moves to gear 3. And gear 3 is when he just runs him over. So right at the start of round 2, he pulls the reaction from Yair, which is to get him to switch stances, and he immediately drives in on a right hand / right hook type shot. That hurts Yair. Doesn't wobble him, whatever, but it lands, and he knows about it. And then one exchange before the finish, Yair throws 2 left kicks and 1 right hand. The left kick comes first, the right hand comes second, and the last left kick comes third. As the right hand is coming, Volkanovski knows that a left kick is coming after, and so throws a big right hook. Now, it misses Yair by a couple of centimeters, but Volk's made the read. And the read is that he's going to come in and he's going to throw a multiple of kicks. After the first kick is a shot, and after the second one is coming in, that's where I have my chance to detonate my shot. And then the next exchange comes in and does exactly that. And you know that it stuns Yair, because Volkanovski immediately, the alertness of his face changes. Yair's hands drop to his side. He starts wobbling back a little bit. And then the finishing sequence itself is just masterful, right? And let me explain why. Because this isn't Francisco Trinaldo, Danny Roberts, right?
Yes.
What this is he moves to Yair Rodriguez, gets a palm clinch, lands a knee, immediately rips to the body, immediately goes straight up through the guard with an uppercut. And now Yair is sinking and the hands are all the way up. Does Volkanovski take a step back and potentially allow Yair to escape? Does he just flurry on the fence and hope that he takes Yair down? No. What he does is he picks him up and he takes him down immediately into a position where he is in a dominant position. He doesn't pull his legs from under him and enter into close guard. He doesn't pull him in and enter into a half guard where Yair has an ability to use a knee shield. He
hooks the leg
into side control, and the leg hook is fucking
unreal.
magic.
And those are the intricacies, Harry, aren't they? I mean, in the heat of the madness and the heat of the chaos, to be so level-headed and so aware of what's happening around you, to kind of hook that leg. And the idea of hooking that leg is to stop Yair from trying to scramble or trying to get in those butterfly hooks or try to even get into full guard. And it sets up Volkanovski perfectly to get off some of his ground and pound, which ultimately ended the fight in the third round. It was absolutely beautiful.
It was. And the other thing about that leg hook, right, is because of the hamstring curling pressure that Volkanovski has on the back, on the front of the shin, it gives him an anchor to Yair's body. So he can swing his hips more freely because there's such isometric tension holding him to Yair. Yair's rooted to the floor, and so by proxy, so is Volkanovski. And that is even more golden. It's even more beautiful to think, this is where I'm going to go. This is how I'm going to stop him from moving. And now Yair obviously did everything in his power to scramble and move. And as he started to bring his knees to his chest, Volkanovski literally just uppercutted both of his legs into a leg drag and carried on wailing. Like, it's one of the most beautiful single-handed, single performances I have seen from a fighter in a long, long, long time. Very similar to the Islam Makhachev performance. We need to be going back and periodically watching that fight to pick up the things that we missed the first times. Beautiful.
And the scary thing is that he just seems to be, even at 34 years of age, evolving as a fighter as well, Harry. You know, we're seeing, you know, the new wrinkles coming into his game each and every fight, which is just phenomenal to see. And it just makes you want to see more and more and more. And hopefully we do get that chance. And there's plenty of takers to come in there. Well, there's a lot of people saying they want that fight. You know, it's easy to say you want it until you get in there and you have to figure out that puzzle. But there's a couple of different avenues that could go down now for Volkanovski. Obviously, he's wanting another crack at that lightweight title. I ain't definitely not going to stand on his way. If that, let that man do whatever the hell he wants to do next. That's what I say. What would you like to see next for Volkanovski?
I'm desperate for the Ilia Topuria fight. I really am. Something to me that I love about Alexander Volkanovski is sort of the humble, but I mean, not quite humble, but the humble nature to who he is. And I feel like that is so much more suited from a philosophical perspective to staying at 145 and just blasting through some fellas. Like, after Ilia Topuria, who is it? Well, it's probably Arnold Allen, right? Well, who is it after Arnold Allen? It's whoever the fucking next guy is that rises up from there. But you could do there are so many performances that he can put in at 145 that just cements and cements and cements his legacy. There was a poll recently that Luke Thomas put out about who is the best 145er of all time. And rightfully so, the answer was Jose Aldo, right? But if you keep Alexander Volkanovski at 145 for 2 or 3 more fights, I think the answer changes. Because Jose Aldo, for the longest time, was a pioneer, certainly, was a trailblazer, certainly pushed the sport of MMA. But let me tell you, Alexander Volkanovski is something fucking different. And I am all for the Islam Makhachev rematch. I'm all for not weight cutting. I'm down for all of it. I'm here for all of it. But in the same vein, something is just unbelievably satisfying and masterful about one person reigning over a division for a significant amount of time and looking unbeatable. And that, to me, is Alexander Volkanovski at 145.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue too much against that either. I'd like to see Topuria next. I feel the way I'm thinking right now, obviously you're going to recency bias is a big thing as well, but I really struggle to see how Topuria does it. I think it's a fascinating fight. I think Topuria deserves it. I mean, he's not doing himself any justice, Topuria, by going out and saying it's either Max Holloway in Spain or a title. Just go out and fucking say you want the title, man. No, don't be putting any ideas in the UFC's head, because they will give you Max Holloway in Spain, and that ain't going to be an easy fight either. So it's like, we don't need to be beating these challengers here. And I agree with you, Alex. Volkanovski, 5 title defenses, still unbeaten at featherweight, to Jose Aldo's run of 9 years undefeated with, I believe, 9 title defenses or something like that. But I mean, greatness is greatness is greatness, and we witnessed greatness on Saturday night. And we also witnessed greatness as well in the co-main event, and that was Alexandra Pantoja, who came in and took the flyweight title away from the champion Brandon Moreno. And that was, I wasn't right for that after watching that fight. I had to go back. I've watched the card 3 times now already, because I basically stood with my hand over my mouth watching this fight, and I can't even put into words, even at this stage, how good and how great it was just to witness these two guys go in there and lay it all on the line. The both guys made a decision that they were going to go to war. The big takeaway that I have from this fight was my worry about Alexandre Pantoja's wildness and unpredictableness, and him being a little bit unorthodox. And I thought that was going to hinder him in this fight, but it actually played in a lot to his benefit. And he did very, very well, I think, to draw Brandon Moreno into an absolute war here. Whereas I felt that if Moreno had kept it more technical, that he might have got the job done on Saturday night. And we'll talk about it a little bit towards the end. In my opinion, I felt that he had done enough, to be honest, to get the job done overall, in my humble opinion on how the fight was scored. We'll talk about the scoring just for a little bit after this, but we're going to break this down from rounds 1 to round 5 as well, Harry. And it's a fight of the ages, one of the best fights that I've ever seen as well. Let's talk about it. How do you feel about what I think about it, about Pantoja's wildness and his ability to draw Brandon Moreno into that war? And it's something that we've seen almost after about 2 minutes into the fight. Brandon Moreno starts the fight with a clinch, draws Pantoja up against the cage, trying to maybe assert his dominance early, trying to make Pantoja have a little bit of doubt into that you're not going to get the better of the grappling exchanges this time around. I'm going to try and dominate and be strong here, but that didn't last for too long. They separated, they started firing wildly, and Pantoja ends up dropping him with a shot in the first round. Crazy, crazy scenes to kick this fight off, Harry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Moreno had a choice. That was my initial read here, was I think Moreno would have been very happy with a feeling out round, bit of jabbing, bit of kicking, maybe a little bit of wildness in some exchanges, maybe a couple of grappling exchanges, grand, no problem. But Pantoja ran across the cage from second 1 and forced Moreno into that clinch because he just went hell for leather. And I called him the Tasmanian Devil on the preview show, and that's exactly what we saw from round 1 to 5. Now,
yeah,
I completely agree with you that if Moreno was able to have more of a quote unquote technical war with Pantoja, maybe it would have been to his betterment. But I just don't think that was possible. I don't think it was an option, because Pantoja was so willing to push the pace, especially in rounds 1, 3, and 5, was so willing to just bite down on the mouthpiece and throw unorthodox shots and scramble and grapple and scramble and grapple and throw shots and take shots and throw shots. You are completely right that this is, if not number 1, at least top 3 of the greatest fights I have ever seen in my life. And that's simply because what we witnessed was elite level MMA at its most competitive. Because we talked about Volkanovski, and that was pretty fucking one-sided, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
This couldn't have been closer. It could not have been closer. And I don't think it was to any detriment to either man. Both men went out and gave us years of their life. They gave us absolute years of their life. To think that Brandon Moreno broke his arm in round 1.
Broke his hand,
sorry. To think he broke his hand in round 1. And you would not have even believed for a second if I'd told you.
When I watched the fight back, I was looking for it. I know the moment when you got mixed up with Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker, who was the one who broke his arm. You could see that happening. It was the second high kick that Turner threw on him, I think, even the second round. But yeah, I was trying to look out to see if there was a place where Moreno might have broke his hand, maybe in defending a kick at one stage from Pantoja. But yeah, you would not have been able to tell. And he still went to war. Like, I mean, he was still throwing that hand. He was landing the better strikes throughout this fight. Like, I mean, the striking exchanges, bar the first round, I think when Pantoja hurt him and dropped him, there was a lot of other stages in the fight where I felt Moreno was getting off the better of the exchanges, the more impactful of the exchanges. But, you know, in not having a choice to go to war, sometimes getting dropped can have that effect on you as well, where you're trying to chase the fight a little bit. You're trying to peg someone back. He's like, oh, you nailed me, I've got to nail you. It's happened time and time again. And you can kind of get drawn into a war from that. And we don't know how clearly Moreno is thinking after getting hurt that badly as well in round one. I mean, there's loads of different factors to say, but looking back at the fight and seeing Moreno's jab in action, I feel that maybe if he can develop a way where he can kind of throw some water on the fire that Pantoja brings in there, that if he can stay away from those grappling exchanges and kind of create this kind of tactical striking battle, that he might have success. But it's so hard to tell. I mean, and a guy like Pantoja's style is so hard to combat. And he just basically went in there, Harry Pantoja did, with the game plan. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It was like a more, look at polish. We were trying to say polish, but even Pantoja came in there with a more polished performance this time around and made it a real close fight in certain stages.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree Moreno had the better of the striking exchanges. Let me just explain what I mean.
He was getting off left hooks to the body, left hooks to the head kicks, and there wasn't too much in it, to be honest.
I think the difference is that Moreno landed the cleaner looking strikes. From a technical perspective, he was throwing strikes and combinations that look perfect, right? There was a couple of times where he lands a leaping left hook, rolls under Pantoja's right hand and lands a gorgeous dig to the left body, right? That is straight out of a boxing school that you would coach. But Pantoja's striking is just as damaging and just as effective. It just doesn't look as nice, right? And we're going to talk in some aspects about this when it comes to Dricus du Plessis and Robert Whittaker. But there are, in every exchange, there is absolutely moments where we look at Moreno and he's landing the more technical, cleaner looking striking. But Pantoja, when he throws a shot, doesn't just hit you with his fist. He follows through with a forearm. There's a knee landing somewhere. There's an upwards elbow coming somewhere. The collar tie isn't just a collar tie. It's a clubbing shot behind your ear before he gets to it. Everything he lands, everything he throws has unorthodox intentions and has unorthodox landing positions. And so whilst I agree that I scored the fight for Moreno as well, by the way, like as much as I agree that all the moments that culminate, that catch your eye as this beautiful striking display, from a judging perspective, actually doesn't mean that much. Because if it's not doing the same amount of damage as a strike or strikes that Pantoja is landing, it can look clean as fuck. But if it's not...
Well, it meant something to Ben Cartilage, who scored 4 out of the 5 rounds. And I mean, I scored a 48-47 to Moreno. Round 1, Pantoja. Round 2, Moreno. Round 3, Moreno.
Yep.
Round 4, Moreno. Round 5, Pantoja.
You scored exactly the same as me.
Yeah, and rounds 3, 4, and 5 are, I mean, I have a gun to my head here. I'm scoring that with the greatest of humbleness and uncertainty. But you know, I'm not going to go here and sit on the fence. You know what I mean? And I made sure to watch it real close. Like, I mean, you're sitting there as a judge trying to score that on the first watch. Like I said it, Shawnee messaged the group on the night, and I said on the night I had leaned towards Moreno. That's what I was like, impossible for me to give a certain score here after watching it. But upon first watch, I was leaning 48-47 Moreno, and I was glad when I watched it back that I felt the same. But I ain't going to sit here and argue for a Pantoja win at all, because I mean, it was razor close. But let's not stray too much into the judging side of things. Let's talk about some of the tactics. Let's talk about some of the technique that was on display in there on Saturday night. I mean, we already talked about Moreno's fantastic heart and determination to kind of go in there and continue with that broken hand, and it would have caused them some problems in grappling, and obviously in striking, where, you know, with a broken hand you don't have that same level of grip strength. You might have more difficult in posting and kind of scrambling a little bit. But you have to give credit to Pantoja for sticking to his game plan and making it effective. And I think that was the kind of big discussion around Pantoja's game plan, is how can we describe effective grappling? What is effective grappling? And did Pantoja utilize effective grappling on Saturday night? What would you think about all of that?
Well, how I've been taught, Mr. O'Neill, is that if you take the back, it is not a scoring position in so much as that it's a positional change. Now, if you are landing massive shots from the back, if you're threatening chokes, if you're threatening face cranks, if you're threatening arm bars, kimuras, these sorts of things from the back, grand, that's damage, right? That's damage. And, you know, if you're Dustin Poirier and you can squeeze the body triangle enough that it breaks Anthony Pettis' rib, that's damage as well, my friend. You fucking rack that up, no problem. I think that there was one face crank in the 3 times that Pantoja had Moreno's back that I counted as a submission attempt, like an actual submission attempt, because Moreno had to tuck his chin inside and actually had to get hands in there and try and figure himself out. And that was when he was standing in round 5. Other than that, I thought Pantoja landed some pot shots from the back, landed some stuff, but he was more focused on controlling the position, which is fine. I have no problem with that, but he was more focused on controlling the position than he was about landing damage or working towards submission. And so that doesn't score as highly for me as if he had started going for submissions from those positional dominances. Now, I might also add that I think one thing I lean and have a criticism for Brandon Moreno is in the second round. So in the second round, the crazy out of the block Pantoja lasted for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he took a big dip. Moreno managed to run him underneath, get the back, take him down, and actually lock in 2 hooks and get a full back control. If I'm Brandon Moreno, I'm noticing that the pace has dropped considerably, and I am noticing that I have to start pushing, because you know that Pantoja can't keep up round 1 pace for 5 rounds. Mm-hmm. And so you need to try and punish him in the second round when you have his back, even if it's just beating him up a bit, squeezing a body triangle, making it dirty, making it horrible, because there was a period of about 40 seconds where nothing happened, right? He had the back, but Pantoja had 2 grips, Moreno had grips, and literally nothing happened. And then Pantoja started to release a grip and immediately exploded out and got scrambled up back to his feet. That, to me, when Moreno goes back and looks at the fight, he is going to kick himself. Because there are moments in that fight, over the 5 rounds, over the arc of the fight, as one Neil likes to say, where Pantoja takes rounds off. And I don't mean takes rounds off as in just does nothing and gets beat up, but he halves the output because he knows he has to keep something in the gas tank for the later rounds. And that second round for Moreno, I scored absolutely nothing for him when it comes to that back control, because he did absolutely nothing with it.
It was based off what he did on the feet before that position is what you would have scored at. And that's what I would have scored 100%. At for him as well. Oh goodness, where do I go from here? I feel a lot of the controversy around this fight is unworthy, to be honest. And I feel a lot of it is based off the miscommunication and the misguidance that we get from the commentary booth about scoring and about questioning where a fight is being going when you really don't have a clue. That's why I would recommend for everybody to go back and watch it without the commentary on. I mean, I have developed a beautiful, beautiful skill of being able to have the commentary on and just simply not listening to it. I just drown that shit out. I can just focus in on the fight. And, you know, it was a wonderful performance from Pantoja. I mean, it was a close fight. through 3, 4, and 5 could have went either way. I'm not going to argue that. Pantoja got the split decision. A lot of controversy over the card of Ben Cartledge, a little bit unjust, because you can't in one breath say, oh my God, that was an amazing close fight, that was unbelievable, and then berate somebody for scoring a close round in the favor of Moreno, because you could have, like, round 4 was razor close, as was round 3, but you could have easily scored. I scored 1 and 5 to Pantoja, 2, 3, 4 to Moreno, but I mean, they're all really, really close rounds, and it's just a pity that, you know, not maybe to the level as what we had maybe with Kaikar, France, and Albazi, but, you know, this circling of conversation about judging is overshadowing the fantastic display of mixed martial arts that both of these fighters come on. And look at it, it might sound a bit rich for me because I'm talking about judging, but we do try our best to kind of talk about the ins and outs of this fight, and I think that's what we will try and focus on from now on about this fight. But what next? Do we do this again, Harry, or what else would you like to say about that?
Just if I may, like, I'm relatively happy just on the judging thing. And again, this is coming from about as fucking humble a position as I can imagine, because I messaged Shawnee, and I messaged Shawnee about a different part of the judging criteria, and we'll get to it when we get to the fight. And it's all the way down with Terrence Mitchell and sorry, with Jalen Turner and Dan Hooker. But I feel confident enough scoring the 5th round for Pantoja. And obviously, the first round is a Pantoja round. He drops him hard. He lands some shots. I got no problem. Fine. The second round to me is as clear of a Moreno round of the 3 rounds. And you're absolutely right. 3 and 4 were so close. So close. And to try and judge that live is an incredibly difficult thing to try and do, because you're three watches in, I'm 2 watches in. I'm going to go back and watch it again, and I can almost guarantee I'll score it differently.
It could happen. It could happen. Like,
just so unbelievably close. And I think the one thing I'll say about the judging, to almost bring it back to the fight, is we need to, as an MMA community, either do one of 2 things. We either need to forget about judging, because it detracts from our enjoyment of the fight, and allow the judges that are employed to do the job to actually do the job and enjoy the fight for what it was, which was an absolute spectacle, a wonderful, beautiful, violent display of mixed martial arts from 2 of the greatest fighters in their divisions. Either do that and just fuck judging off completely. Forget about it. Don't worry about it. Turn the TV off after the fight's finished, because it doesn't fucking matter who wins. Both of them are winners. Or go and properly attempt to educate yourself with an unbiased, unemotional, forget about your bets, forget about what favorite fighter you have. Try and look at how the rounds are scored. Try and look at what the judging criteria is, and then try to approach fighting from a perspective of facts. Now, the reason that's really difficult is because what happened to me specifically is when I started, and happens even now, when I watch fights from an analysis perspective, I don't enjoy them necessarily. I don't enjoy them as a fan. I don't have that high octane adrenaline rush sorts of feelings that you get when you watch it live as a fan. Now, when you watch something like Pantoja,
fucking hell, I do. I was fucking walking around the living room like a maniac after watching that fight. I couldn't sit down. Right. It was. I understand what you're saying though, but you're trying to tune that out when you're watching it from an analytical point of view.
That doesn't happen for me. I've lost that now, right? Like, it takes a lot to get me to a position where I watch a fight and I'm fucking jumping up and around in my seat and stuff, because I'm so used to looking at it from a certain perspective. Yeah. And there was a moment there where I really tried to understand the basics of judging, and I had to do the same thing. But that, from a fan, is boring. It's rubbish. It takes away from the enjoyment of the sport. So why would you do it? And so I understand both arguments, but you
do it though, because we're coming on here to discuss it, and we owe an honest level of perspective, and there's not too many out there that can look at a fight the way you look at a fight and break it down the way you break it down. So, like, I mean, I have to give you credit at that, but, you know, with that kind of talent comes the sacrifice of not being a fan anymore. It's something that I have had to adjust to. Like, I'll allow myself on fight night to go a little bit cray watching fights, but then I will go back and I will watch them again to ensure that I have my head on my shoulders when I'm making opinions about these fights as well. But just this was phenomenal fight. It went into the fight of the year category. It's going to have competition from Islam and Volk. Based off what I've seen, it's probably going to win in my head right now. I'll have to go back and watch the fights again at the end of the year, side by side, and maybe make my decision. But the way I'm thinking now, it's definitely the best fight I've seen this year so far. Fantastic display, great story from Pantoja. Coming on today on the MMA Hour. I guess maybe, I know, going to round it off in a negative way, but it was kind of crazy to hear him say that only 2 fights ago he was driving for Uber Eats to make ends meet. And it's the sad reality of the fight game as well, Harry. I mean, yeah, I know that you have some thoughts on this. We want to finish on this, and then we might talk about what's next to kind of make a positive spin. 50 minutes in, we're only 2 fights deep. This was always going to be a long one, folks. Just maybe your thoughts on some of the storylines that broken today from Pantoja.
It's heinous, despicable. It should be fucking criminal, is the honest answer. Pantoja, right, looks into the microphone, looks into the camera immediately after winning the title. He hasn't even got the emotional energy left to cry. His face is absolutely fucking destroyed from a 25-minute back and forth, maybe one of the toughest, if not the toughest fight of his entire life. And all he can say is asking for the validation of his father's feelings. And you want to tell me that 2 fights ago, he's running around in a car, driving for Uber Eats so he can Jesus, I've done the same thing, so he can make ends meet? This is the thing that makes me despise and detest MMA and specifically the UFC. Because if you are Dana White and you're sat cage side and you hear that raw outpouring of emotion, and then less than 24 hours later, you hear Pantoja go out and say what he says, and you're able to go home at night and sleep soundly, knowing what you've just witnessed, and you think it's absolutely fine, that to me is absolutely despicable. You go to the casinos, you go to this place, you go to that place, and you gamble with more than you pay fighters on an entire card. That is absolute fucking corruption at the highest levels. And I hear all the garbage about, oh, what about Bellator? What about Cage Warriors? What about KSW? That's fine. The UFC is the only company turning a profit. And if the UFC had the slightest bit of empathy and the slightest bit of gumption, when you have a rank next to your name, you have made it. You have made it as one of the elitist fighters in your division in the entire world. There is absolutely no reason, there's no economic argument you can give to me that will trounce the empathy of a fighter working their entire career to not just have a rank next to their name, but a rank in the UFC. And if you want to then tell me it's fine for that fighter to have a second job in order to support their income, I don't know what to say to you. Tell me a basketball player that's just been drafted that has to work a second job. Tell me an NFL player. Tell me a soccer player, right? Tell me any of them. It does not happen. We are talking elite level athletes, and they 110 million% not have to drive around in a fucking Uber Eats car to try and make ends meet. Disgrace. What do we do next? Give me that fight again. All times. Thanks.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and very well said as well, Harry. I know you do feel strongly about those things, but we have to acknowledge those things, but we also recognize that we've seen a fantastic fight and the beauty of mixed martial arts in there. But we want to see these guys getting paid what they deserve, and that's the very least that they deserve as well. Let's go on and talk about Dricus du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker, Harry. Whoo, a big upset here. We got this one way wrong. And we have to give all the credit in the world to Dricus du Plessis, who went in there and just put on the performance of his career so far. And I was on the night, I was like, oh, Robert Whittaker, didn't perform to his best. He didn't look the same. But I watched it back, and he actually had a really good start to this fight. Robert Whittaker did, and he gave Dricus du Plessis lots to think about, and he came through the fire and still performed. Your thoughts, please?
So I do think there was something wrong. I don't know whether it's a pre-existing injury. I'm not quite sure, because I completely agree with you. Like, one of the boys after training this evening came in and said, well, how shocked are you that Dricus du Plessis beat Rob Whittaker? And my first answer was, it's MMA, so not that shocked. But in the same vein, pretty fucking shocked, because that's not the way that I had it going down on the preview show. But something to me, my spidey senses, my MMA spidey senses are telling me that there's an intangible that we don't know about here. Because up until this point, Robert Whittaker has been a supremely conditioned athlete. Say what you will about his skills or his durability or his effectiveness or his style, fine. He has been an incredibly durable athlete. Go back to the Jacare performance, go back to the Yoel Romero performance, go back to some of the way in which he burnt the gas tank against Darren Till. Think about the fights with Israel Adesanya. Think about the fights with Paulo Costa. That man has an unbelievable gas tank. And he was gassed in 2.5 minutes. I don't understand. I don't quite understand, because it was prime Rob Whittaker for 2.5 minutes. Comes out, stance switches gorgeously, checks every kick that's coming towards his legs. Okay, takes a couple of body kicks, but that Dricus du Plessis seems like he has a leg the size of my fucking table. It's unbelievable.
He is huge, though. Dricus, the size of Dricus in there blew me away. I was like, this is a big, big man right
He's
here.
a big man.
And he used that physicality very well as when he did eventually get the fight down, Harry.
But this to me is where it's already gone. Because Rob lands a gorgeous takedown, times it beautifully, runs into the cage, hits a double leg gorgeous, does all of the grappling things really, really nicely, fine, no problem. And then he gets head and arm thrown. Yeah. Like, what is this? 115-pound WMMA in 2015? Like, what are we looking at here? Something to me screams, okay, something's wrong here. Because Whittaker then does a good job of tying up Dricus, but then starts looking for arm bars from guard. Like, I've never seen Rob Whittaker be looking for arm bars from guard in this middleweight run. I see him not really on his back at all, but I see him wrestling up. I see him counter wrestling. That's the thing he's good at. He was supposed to be going to the Commonwealth Games or the Oceanic Games for the wrestling team. And yet he's searching for arm bars and he's searching for like guard positions against Dricus. That doesn't seem right. And then from that moment on, there's a really tough end to that first round for Rob Whittaker. And then it just doesn't seem like he's there anymore. So I'd love to hear.
I'm glad you said that. He did not look like he was there. There was a moment when he was on the stool in between rounds 1 and rounds 2 where he's just staring into oblivion. You know, getting taken down, getting that massive cut. That's not going to help things. But it was like there was something going on in his mind at that moment that nobody else knew about, to be honest, where he was not getting any response when his corner asked him questions. He's not taking in any information. He's processing something in his head at that stage where, is it, I need to get out of here? Something has gone wrong. What's happening here? He cannot process what is happening, or it's a feeling that he's not used to in there. And maybe that's what you're alluding to, is that because he did kind of start slowing down a little bit. It just, things didn't start going well. And then also, it was a very unusual shot that hurt him, which led to the finishing sequence as well from Dricus. Just like a straight power jab. Obviously, it was a jab based off Dricus's power hand. He was switching stances very well. I feel, very strange performance. But I don't want to kind of take away from the performance of Dricus too, who I believe went in there and did perform to the best of his abilities in the UFC so far. Gas tank looked good. That was my biggest worry here. My take on this fight was that I believed that Robert Whittaker would be able to put on a pace on Dricus that he wouldn't be able to maintain. And I felt what happened to Robert Whittaker was going to eventually happen to Dricus in the octagon. And it was exactly the opposite the way it played out. It was, you know, Dricus that took all the confidence and the ability away from Robert Whittaker, who was slowly fading out of the fight. And it was just, you know, fair play to Dricus du Plessis, proved us all wrong, but, you know, not without an exclamation mark, not without us doubting that maybe we'll find out when Robert Whittaker speaks about it in time, but, you know, fair play. Look, that's not Dricus's fault. Dricus went in there and did his thing, looked super dominant and top control, got off some shots, really awkward style. How would you, I mean, unorthodox is probably the best way to describe his style, but a really hard style to try and combat in there. Dricus, who does, we talk about technical brilliance of Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, everything looks labeled and untechnical, but effective for Dricus du Plessis, and that's the biggest thing, really, isn't it?
Right. And this is kind of my argument to Pantoja as well, right? Like, I'm not comparing the beauty of the two, because it's not even remotely close. Pantoja is far, far, far more beautiful. But this was kind of a conversation we were having just before we pressed record, and that was Dricus kind of went in there and just used intensity and just used like physical prowess to find his way through the fight. Like, there's an element where, one thing I really like about him is he covers distance so quickly. Like, he's so long and he's so big that when he takes strides, he seems to cover the octagon in like 2 strides, which is just insane, given the octagon's like fucking 30 feet or whatever it is. And so that for sure is a big thing. The left body kick was landing, and you could hear it. And when you're in a crowd that's that loud and you can still hear the smacks, you know that they're very, 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 very
We
powerful.
were speaking about that Saturday night, me and a couple of my buddies, when we were watching the fight, and the impact of the strikes were more audible throughout the night, I felt, which was great. Like, because we want to hear, like, obviously when we're dealing with judging and stuff like that, we're kind of taking in the impact of strikes, and it is kind of hard to get a kind of an estimation on how impactful it is. You'll get a better kind of a view maybe sitting cage side. But yeah, it was good. I'm glad you brought that up, because it just sparked that thought.
Absolutely. And when he hits you, he hits hard. Like, he absolutely hits hard. Now, I agree that he reaches dramatically. I'd call his style lanky, right? Because he just throws this absolutely insanely large ham out at a man. And there's like this brick lunchbox at the end of it, and it cracks dudes, and it lands, and it hurts. And there is definitely like I would imagine him like, I think it was Roy Jones talked about this in a book once, and he was saying of guys that he's sparred with, and there's like different types of power, right? There's like a snapping power where it goes and it comes back, and it's not like a massive concussive blow, but you're immediately dazed. It's like, what the fuck was that? It's like a whiplash power. And then there's like a thudding power where it hits you and it feels like a giant mass has just crushed into you. It doesn't necessarily need to be fast, or doesn't necessarily need to be like super powerful. It's just like a thudding blow. And then there's like a painful power where you feel your bones moving when you get hit, right? It feels to me like Dricus is the second. He's a massive thudding puncher. Like, when you saw Rob take some of the shots, he like wheeled away like, fuck me. Yeah. What was that like? And whilst I think, and this is my early thoughts because I think this is what's next, right? I feel like Dricus and that style is a horrendous style matchup for Israel Adesanya, because I think Adesanya is going to be able to teep him, leg kick him, come over the top of those shots with question mark kicks. I think he's going to be able to move his feet better. I think he's going to be able to play the matador to the bull far, far, far better with his footwork. But if Dricus du Plessis can do the same thing he did in round 1, and it looked like he was continuing it for another 5 minutes in round 2, if he can show you 3 to 4 rounds of that same gas tank, that same output, and more specifically, that same level of power, it's a very, very interesting prospect for Israel Adesanya, because it doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's styles make fights. It's the classic statement when you're talking about it. And, you know, if I feel it'd be foolish if Dricus was to go in there and try and strike with him. I feel he will try and close the distance and use his power and strength to try and put Izzy down on the mat. And it's interesting. Look, we've gone on to what's next already. It is going to be Israel Adesanya, and it is going to be Dricus du Plessis. look at Israel Adesanya goes out there and makes an absolutely monumental, inspirational post-fight speech on believing in yourself. And after his last win against Alex Bahia, and I think my relationship with Israel Adesanya is up and down because, you know, massive respect for him as a fighter, even though I do have my opinions on hoping that he would have a little bit more output and be a little bit more entertaining. But also outside of the ring is a guy who I respect, but I cannot relate to in some of the carry on that he does and the way he carries himself. When you want to be inspirational and you want to be a role model for kids, I don't feel going in and doing what you did after that fight inside the octagon was the best way to handle yourself in that situation. I understand this is the fight game. I understand emotions are high, and I'm not even educated or even going to go down into the history of what it may go from race relations, etc. I'm not even going to go there. But however you feel about a certain situation, you've got to have a little bit of know-how on how to handle yourself in certain situations. And I feel Israel let himself down just slightly inside the cage on Saturday night. But you know what? The fact of the matter is, Harry, that UFC are going to buy into that. The UFC are going to be showing that face off, and the UFC are going to sell the fight based off all those deep, dark aspects of this potential fight between Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya, which is only going to be about 2 months away now at this stage, which is also crazy. Maybe share your thoughts on the aftermath of the fight and what you think next.
Yeah, I mean, I try my best to stay away from having opinions of fighters' personality because I do my best to not look at them, right? Because I know myself personally that I am somebody that's susceptible to bias, just like everyone else is.
And I'm the same. Excuse me for interrupting, but it was thrown straight into our face on Saturday night.
Right. And I didn't see it live, obviously. I also don't watch post-fight press conferences. I don't watch post-fight interviews. But because I was on Twitter, I also saw it, right? This is what I mean by I do my best to just watch the fights and nothing else. I do my best not to be swayed by anything else because I know myself personally that there is a chance, whether it's an outsider or otherwise, that there's a chance that it will affect the way I look at the fight. And the fight to me is the most important thing. What happens when they close the door and the ref says go and they do the punching things, that to me is the most important. Now, my personal opinion of Israel Adesanya's performance in that face-off is pretty bad because there are certain things, certain words, certain topics, certain phrases that I think as a global society, we've gotten to a point where we understand that you're just playing with fire. And there are things that you can say them and you can say them in specific circles. And because of those circles are so tight and so understanding and so trusting that the context doesn't need explaining. But those circles are not a packed arena on the biggest pay-per-view of the year, possibly of all time, in front of millions and millions of fans. It's just not. And so I understand that there is history. I understand there is deep, dark history. I understand that this is possibly the result that you wanted, possibly not. I understand emotions get the better of you. But like you said, when you are a star, like Israel Adesanya is, and he has millions of people looking up to him, millions of people looking to him as a role model in the way that they should act, both as a human, but also as an African man, woman, child. I don't think when he looks back on that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that it'll be his proudest moment because you have to, in some fashion, and this is, I'll just derail this completely now, but this is something that we criticize Conor McGregor for, right? The biggest star in our sport, and anytime he makes a fuck up, everyone is onto him, and rightfully so. Yes, he's a human. Yes, he makes mistakes, and that's fine. But there are mistakes, and then there are egregious mishaps. And I think this is one of the things that we saw there. Language is important. Words mean something. And if you're Israel Adesanya, who has inspired thousands and thousands and thousands of people with your words before, you also have to understand the gravity of them when you misuse them.
Absolutely. And even like, the dark comments that were made, even the cringiness of 36 and me, 26 and me, it's goddamn 23 and me, for fuck's sake. And anyway, we shall move on. Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis. I'm not confident that that's the end of it. I think it could go down. Israel is the type of guy that doubles down on this kind of stuff. So, we could be in for a very, very interesting build-up into that fight. But another interesting fight was Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner. It was an absolutely phenomenal fight, a fight that I put down also as a fight of the year ahead of as a nomination. It deserves a nomination. It deserves a nomination. I don't want you to shake your head. It definitely does. A show of heart, determination. And we're talking about people not looking themselves. Jalen Turner, obviously, you'll raise questions coming in. Why did he miss weight? Why did he not kind of push the pace a little bit more at times? Why didn't he choose to take the fight down? Well, maybe we'll get the answers to those questions. But all we can do is we can just deal with what did happen in the fight. And it was a crazy fight. Loads of momentum swings, loads of impactful strikes, and another split decision. Harry, your thoughts, please, on this fight.
So I think this, to me, is why I wouldn't put it as a fight of the year candidate. And let me explain that, right? So I don't think both people in this fight performed to the absolute apex of their ability. They put on a brilliant fight, extremely enjoyable, extremely entertaining, high skill. But when you then look at a fight like Pantoja and Moreno, both of those guys performed about as well as they are going to perform in their careers. And it was an everything fight. It had absolutely everything. It had striking, it had momentum swings, it had grappling swings, it had submission attempts, it had knockdowns, it had the fucking lot. Hooker and Turner, I think the reason why I wouldn't put it in is because I actually have criticisms for Turner than I do for Hooker. I think Hooker, especially as you said, you notice the moment his arm breaks and he's like, sure, fuck it, I'm here now.
You can see the fucking indenture in his arm after it happens. I'm like, oh my God, this. And I didn't notice it obviously the first time around. It was the second time around. I was like, oh my goodness. But continue, sir.
And he just fucking's like, well, lads, I'm here now, right? He said it's Joe Rogan, right? It's just a scratch. We'll find out later. Brother, your arm is not connected anymore. And it's just a scratch. Like the thing I wrote in my notes, right? One of the things I wrote in caps, which is just something to talk about, is that Dan Hooker has more heart, more grit, more toughness, more determination than most of the guys in this division.
100%.
When you get to the elite apex level, I think that's not true, but anyone in and around. And to me, the IQ test, which is what I called this fight coming in on the preview show, Jalen Turner failed because Jalen Turner shouldn't have let it get to a point where he was trying to fight Dan Hooker with a top trump card of grit, determination, and heart because he was going to lose. Your point about the weight, absolutely important point. Why didn't he push the pace? Why didn't he try and grapple? If you can go out against Matoya Gamrot and have a fight that ends in a split decision with some wonderful grappling displays, sir, why are we seeing you throw shots with your elbow out here, not extending to your full range of motion? Why are we seeing you get into pocket exchanges? Why are we never seeing a double until the third round when the fight's essentially already over? Like those questions.
And he gassed out as well. He gassed out. And yeah. So, there must have been something going on for me as well. I feel that Jalen Turner was trying to set up that leg, left high kick to the head, and he landed it cleanly too. I think that was his ace in his back pocket. I think did excellently to set up that shot with the front teep kicks throughout round 2 and at the start of round 3, whereas he just turned it into a head kick excellently. That's what you're doing. When you're seeing a fighter do that, it's number one, obviously, to take away from the gas tank, but you're throwing certain techniques to try and make the illusion that that's what you're going to do. And you're trying to fool your opponent into thinking that that's the shot you're going to throw all the time. And you're trying to fool him into thinking that you're throwing particular striking sequences at certain times. And he did it excellently in round 2, where he landed as clean as a head kick as you will see. and Dan Hooker ate it for fucking dinner. I could not believe my eyes when that kick landed. Like, that alone to me deserves a nomination to go in for some category and for some award. There should be like Hard Bastard of the Year award. That's a new category that we should bring in. I mean, I had no other category to put that fight into because of what we've seen. So you have to at least give it a nomination, in my opinion, for Fight of the Year, because there was these, okay, we're not seeing the technical masterclass that we might see in the co-main event or the main event, but we're seeing other levels of entertainment, which, also exist in mixed martial arts, where, maybe not the best of their abilities were on show, but they were even enough on the night, which made it a very exciting, entertaining fight. Amount of times that you're going, and oh my God, in that fight. I mean, it was, for me, in my personal opinion, and I also respect your opinion, that's why I would kind of label it as at least a nomination. Not going to win it, but just a nomination. And tremendous show of heart from Dan Hooker, who just ate everything and just showed his experience and showed his heart. And that was probably, like you described, his best ability inside the cage, the ability to absorb strikes and to continue moving forward. And obviously, the level of technical ability does let him down when he does fight elite level fighters. And we've seen that on show as well. But I have to say, I was happy for Dan Hooker that he got this moment, because I didn't think he was going to get it. I thought that he was going to be outperformed by Jalen Turner. I thought Jalen Turner would be able to mix it up with him on the feet, but I felt and I expected Turner to try and use his grappling, which I feel would have gotten him a win much easier if he was able to get it off. But yeah, there's that asterisk there around the missed weight by 3 pounds too. It wasn't a small miss; it was a big miss, and something went on in the camp that we don't have the privy of that information right now. And I mean, great fight, split decision. A little bit of controversy about Adelaide Bird scoring the third round for Turner. I thought it was massively egregious on the night. Looking at it back, I mean, Turner had some success at the start of the round, but I mean, that was a Hooker round all day. I mean, I don't know what she was looking at when she scored that round, but not too many takeaways from this. Obviously, what's next for Hooker? And give him another similar test to that, I guess. I mean, is he going to make a run for the title? No, he's not. Jalen Turner, it's back on the horse for him. A big boy at lightweight. If it wasn't an injury, do you think it might be a problem for him to get down? I guess the next fight is going to tell us a lot, Harry, and whether he can get it down. I feel, he's been successful time and time again. It'll be interesting to see what he does next.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the other thing that we'll say for Hooker, right, is it shows you what 10 pounds of a weight cut really does, right?
For
because
sure.
Against Arnold Allen, that chin was demolished. And then Jalen Turner throws everything but the second kitchen sink at B&Q, and Hooker just eats it all like it's fucking Wheatos with some milk in it, right? And I think for Hooker, look, you've said it right. Just put him in fun fights now. Just put him with strikers that he'll have fun with, and there's no real, title ramifications. It's just this placement is fine for him, right? Or you want to put him at top of the prelims, that's fine too. Just chuck him in with people that will have striking battles with him and just see where this thing plays out. For Jalen Turner, I'm very worried for Jalen Turner, not because of the weight miss necessarily, because, fuck weight cutting, whatever, but it's more that this was a guy who I specifically had really high hopes for, had a disastrous assignment for his UFC debut on short notice. And, these things happen in MMA, fine. Comes back and has had some absolutely phenomenal performances. And he's one of those guys with the physique that I'm super biased towards, which is very, very long, very lanky. And it felt to me as though he was figuring out how to use it. In this fight, he threw all of that out of the window and looked to have regressed drastically. Is that because of something in the camp? Is that because the weight cut was horrendous? I don't know. Like you say, the next one is going to tell me a lot. But I don't know what the UFC do with Jalen Turner now. He's 28 years of age. So there's still certainly time to go and turn this around. But do the UFC want to reinvest in another turnaround for Jalen Turner? I don't know that they do necessarily. And so if they don't, well, are they going to push him to the next up-and-coming hungry monster that's coming through that 155-pound division? I don't know. But I'm excited to see what name they put next to Dan Hooker. It's going to be something like a Drew Dober or something like that, right? It'll be that type of fight. But yeah, for Jalen Turner, big question marks for his next one. Big question marks.
Absolutely. No real question marks, Harry, on the performance of Bo Nickel in the opening fight of the main card. Went out there, laid some hands on Woodburn, and got the fight done in 38 seconds. Not too much to break down here, but curious to hear your assessment. I'll give Bo Nickel all the credit in the world for not taking the easy way out here, which would have been to kind of close the distance and take the fight down. What I was impressed with Bo Nickel here was how he came out and fainted, first of all. His feint game was excellent. He level changed once. He went a little bit further the next time and actually level changed and initiated grappling and then separated straight away. And that was excellent because it gave the illusion to Woodburn that he wanted to take the fight down, or he was trying for that. And it was something that Woodburn didn't take into account when he got absolutely demolished with that overhand right and then subsequently finished with the flurry that came after. What's your assessment on the 38 demolition of Val Woodburn, who we have to give all the credit in the world for coming in here at short notice to take on a very high level prospect? And he was unfortunate. He went for it. He went for a big one and he missed and he got paid. But look, that's what you got to do.
Look, if you're Woodburn, you're going to get another one, and then let's see, right? So we'll figure it out. We're going to find out whether he's an interesting guy in this division or not. The thing that impressed me about Bo Nickel was that he was willing to go out and exchange, because he certainly took shots in those exchanges, nowhere near to the drama of the shots that he gave out. I think the thing that impressed me the most was that he sat down on his shots well. Okay, the form, the technique, the beauty, the crispness, the perfection of the shots was horrendous, right? But it shows me something. And the thing it shows me is that kid, even when throwing imperfectly and improperly, has demolition power in his hands. And that is an even more exciting prospect than we had before, because we know he can wrestle, and we know that that's the great equalizer in this. We know that coming in, Val Woodburn was like, well, sure, look, I can't get taken down because then bad things are going to happen to me. And so my best opportunity is to keep it standing, try and keep myself away from the fence, and we'll see how this goes. And actually, for Val Woodburn, it played out exactly as he wanted. Bo Nickel wanted to trade in the pocket, and it just so happened that he got clipped and got finished. Fine. But for Bo Nickel to come out and be like, well, look, I'm going to try and sit down on my punches, and I'm going to try and finish this guy, is very, very impressive. To see him actually go out and do it is very impressive. Although the way they were thrown wasn't great, I was actually very, very impressed with the shot selection. He picked his shots very, very nicely. He went to the body. He went upstairs. The shovel uppercut was the right shot to pick at the right time. And obviously the left hand and some of the other finishing shots were great. But to have the awareness to pick the right shots, regardless of how they're thrown, we've got time to fix that, no problem. But I think fixing a fighter's IQ and fixing a fighter's shot selection is harder than being like, you threw a jab wrongly, let's spend a couple of weeks fixing that. Very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. 5-0 now for Bo Nickel. What do we do next with him, Harry? It's going to be very hard to kind of keep him away from the top 15 of this division. Do we give him maybe a small step up again for a couple of fights? How would you like to see him progress in the coming year or so?
He 1,000,000% has to stay exactly where he is. I do not want to see any step ups for now. Let's just keep him exactly where he is. If you want to do a Jacob Malkoun, we can do a Jacob Malkoun. If you want to do let me think. If you want to do a Rodolfo Vieira, we could do a Rodolfo Vieira.
You could even put Tresean Gore back in there.
We could even put Tresean Gore back in there. I don't know if Julian Marquez is going to come back, but you could do that type of fight, right? I want to make sure that he is kept in and around this same level. I just had a quick look on Topology because I was going to say Michael Olealanchuk, but he has a fight with Chidion Jaquani.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not mad at any of those selections, and it'll be interesting to see what the UFC decide to do with Bo Nickel next. Is there any other retirement that we are going to see that was better than Robbie Lawler's apparent retirement on Saturday night? And to cap it all off for Robbie Lawler at the end of a great career, he gets highlighted on the Severe Spotlight on Monday as well. I mean, weekends don't get much better for that if you're Robbie Lawler. How about that, Harry?
Fuck's sake. Christ. Look, my heart really wanted to write about Moreno and Pantoja, to be honest, but I think that it's such a rare unicorn to have a fighter like Robbie Lawler with the ups and downs of his career, in and out of the UFC, wins titles, the Rory McDonald fight. Like, I have that fight painted on my wall just over here. For those of you seeing, you can see the two here. One's a picture of Robbie with his lip split, and the other one's Rory looking like a ghost. And like, that fight really means something to me. It's the first time I saw a fight that moved me, like really internally moved me. And then for him to have been the champion in the way he conducted himself as a champion, the way he fought his championship fights, and then to come out on International Fight Week, to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, to see him get emotional for a man that doesn't really get emotional, and to see him then dispatch of a guy in, okay, Nico Price is not an amazing fighter, but it was the perfect level of matchup. That matchup could have gone wrong for Robbie Lawler. It absolutely could have. And for him to come out into a roaring UFC 90 crowd, a bay of adoration at his feet, and then to decimate a fella in rolling all those years back and looking just phenomenal. It's just too good. It's too good of a story. Robbie Lawler is too important as a person in our MMA history to pass up the opportunity to write about him. And so, sure, look, we had to do it.
Yeah, and of course, and massive credit to the UFC too for giving him his shine after that win as well, with the video montage. It was just perfect, very moving, very emotional, and it's exactly how you want to see a legend go out to in typical Robbie Lawler fashion. Like, I mean, we could stay here and speak all day about Robbie Lawler and his career. I guarantee you it's not going to be the last you'll hear about Robbie Lawler on SevereMMA. There'll be career retro. There'll be lots of conversations about him and his legend. Definitely will not be forgotten. We've got to move on though. We're getting on up. We need to get this man to bed. Tatsuro Taira, high hopes on Taira. Had a few problems to deal with against Chairez on Saturday night, Harry. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. We must remember, before we talk about all of this kid is only 23 years of age and has tons of time to grow. And yeah, maybe we might have to cool the jets on it just a small bit to allow that development to materialize, because there was a lot of shady moments on the feet for Tatsuro Taira on Saturday night.
Right. I think I'm going to say the same thing about Taira as I will about Cameron Simon. And I think I stick by my point that Tatsuro Taira is just a little bit ahead of Cameron Simon, because when we were grappling, boy, oh boy, does Tatsuro Taira know how to do the fighting things. We talked about it with Alexander Volkanovski. Taira has a slightly different approach. He's far more submission orientated, but his ability to pass, his ability to leg pummel, his ability to kill the hips, his ability to strip butterfly hooks, to strip knee shields, to land damage, to isolate arms, to put Edgar Chairez's head in positions where it was going to take damage, is just absolutely phenomenal for a 23-year-old fighter. It is genuinely gorgeous grappling to watch. However, you can't take as many left hooks as he did. You can't be caught throwing ones as much as he did. You can't be caught as cleanly with as many jabs as he did. You can't be caught throwing naked low kicks as much as he did. And there are moments when you see a little bit of head movement, you see a little bit of 1-2, you see him push through, you see him land his shots, and all of the green structures are there and available. But if I'm Tatsuro Taira's corner and I'm Tatsuro Taira's team, I am doing absolutely nothing for the next 3 to 4 months than fixing defensive head movement and to fixing parrying, slipping, and then countering, because the grappling is there. Chairez threw that fight away by jumping a guillotine 4 times. Absolutely threw the fight away. Like,
I was thinking about that.
Horrendous.
How many fights do we have to look at before people will realize that you can't be throwing up guillotines left, right, and center?
No, and the worst thing is in the fourth attempt in the 3rd round at the end, it was actually tight. Like he jumped close guard, managed to get Taira to roll to a mount. But I mean, there's 8 seconds left, right? He's never going to finish it. But
you're going to struggle to find the squeeze that you would maybe in rounds 1 or rounds 2 at the end of a fight as well. Even if it is locked in quite well, you know, you can still grit it out maybe a little bit more if you don't feel that squeeze. But yeah, I mean, lessons learned here. But like, you can be forgivable to Taira. This is a fight that young fighters need to kind of go back and watch and then work around as well. And look, it could have ended up a lot worse. He could have got finished. He could have got submitted, but he didn't perform well. He made a couple of mistakes, and he still proved that he has the tenacity to go and get that win. And we did see excellent spells, like you did say, on the ground. Any final thoughts on this fight before we do a quick preview of our overview of the prelims?
Let's cool the jets. Let's cool the jets. Give him time. Give him time.
That's it. Perfect. Denise Gomez, Yasmin Yaragway. I mean, my goodness. Denise Gomez just went out and said, fuck your undefeated record to Yasmin Yaragway here. This was a ferocious overhand right. Not the first one that we seen all night, but it was still just as ferocious. Jesus Aguilar will have maybe a bit of a say on who landed the best overhand on the right, but this was absolutely devastating from Denise Gomez, and she is slowly becoming someone that we need to start paying attention to in the 115-pound division, having come off our win against Bruna Brazil, who will be taking on Shauna Bannon pretty soon at UFC London. But really tremendous performance here from Bruna Brazil, eh?
It's 101 striking. She took 2 steps to her right-hand side. Uruguay did nothing but go backwards. And so Denise Gomez said, cool, no problem. You've left me the right over the hand open, drops it on her chin, finishes it, grand. Let's move on. And let's move on from Krupp Menefield as well.
Yeah, Krupp Menefield. Yeah, I mean, you said we got nothing from this fight. We finally got a winner based off the first draw. That was Alonzo Menefield, guillotine choke. He got the job done. Jimmy Krupp, man. I mean, I feel there's so much more of a fighter in there than what we're seeing with Jimmy Krupp. It's just not happening for him. Someone I was very, very impressed with on the undercard, Harry, was Vitor Petrino from Brazil. 9-0 he moved to, 25 years of age, went in there and got an arm triangle choke over Marcin Pacino from Poland. I was really impressed. I'm very curious to hear what you thought of this man's performance.
If Petrino can learn a jab, he's going to be an incredibly dominant player in this division. Mark my words. The problem with him at the moment is everything's big power, and when he throws everything, he's throwing the same thing over and over again. I think there was like 3 or 4 left kicks in a row. At the elite level, that's going to cause you big, big problems. But the grappling is great, right? He's dominant on top. He's heavy on top. He takes his time on top. He's patient on top. I got no problem with that whatsoever. He knows he's in there for 15 to 25 minutes. And so there's no need to waste any energy. But if he can learn how to jab and use that to set everything up, we have a serious contender on our hands. Marcin Pacino is absolute garbage, by the way.
Yeah, he's not great, but I mean, I think Pacino has lots of time to develop that in his game. And yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting old run for him. And yeah, but I think, you know, we can probably label him in the same category as Cameron Simon, who we'll talk about next, and Tatsuro Taira. Let's cool the jets. You know, we have a tendency to want to rush these talents up the division. We got to let them, what do the kids call it this way? You got to let it cook. Got to let them cook a little bit. Got to let them cook. And Cameron Simon definitely cooked up a win on Saturday night against Terence Mitchell. A real good performance. No drama, no controversy surrounding this one. Knew what he wanted to get done, got the fight down, landed some ground and pound, got him out there. Not the perfect performance, it has to be said, but went in there and got the job done relatively easy in round 1 with the TKO via ground and pound.
Yeah, so I wasn't as impressed with Cameron Simon in this one. He has that ability to win which is so important. And he knows how to win, which is very, very, very important. But he went out, looked a bit unsteady on his feet to begin with. Terrence Mitchell gassed himself out trying to wrestle. Simon did a good job of keeping himself safe and keeping himself protected and always looking to improve his position, and that's fine. The one thing that I will give him absolutely massive props for is he found a guillotine and he used it to sweep. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That in a 20-year-old, give me all that level of fight IQ, because that guillotine was tight. Make no mistake about it, that guillotine was tight. But he knew that he had another 2 rounds potentially to go. And so why gas your arms out on something that isn't perfectly locked in? Just use it to gain a better position. And that's exactly what he did. I would have liked to have seen him let go of the guillotine and move to either a far lat grip or go immediately to a body lock to be able to suck the hips of Mitchell in. And that would have stopped the scramble that we eventually got to. But obviously, Simon did a good job of winning the scramble regardless, lands some really nice body shots. And one thing I just wanted to highlight that I really enjoyed about Cameron Simon is there was a moment when he was sort of in a 3/4 guard, but wasn't. It was almost in a leg drag, but wasn't. Mitchell's sort of back and hips were facing Cameron Simon, and he was looking to step over, but Mitchell had sort of curled up his left knee to his left elbow, which is what you do, right? That's the defensive position. And instead of just looking to step over immediately, Cameron Simon placed the sort of sole of his foot on the kneecap of Mitchell and dragged it backwards, dragged his knees away. So there was ample amount of ability for him to step in and take a 3/4 mount, which is what he wanted. And then the shots rained down, and that's how the finish came. And again, in the heat of the moment, after having that sort of crazy first couple of minutes, for him to use the guillotine to sweep, improve his position, and then find a way to strip that knee away, it's those tiny details to me that tells me that this kid can grapple, that tells me this kid knows how to fight. And I think the interesting thing actually is that both Tatsuto Taira and Cameron Simon seem to have in their, at least when they're on top, seem to have some wonderful things to offer grappling wise, and then some things to fix on the feet. But yeah, for Cameron Simon, let's cool the jets even more than Tatsuto Taira. Let's give him loads of time, and let's give him exactly these style of matchups going forward.
Yeah, 100%. A very, very exciting prospect. One last quick question. Who wins, Cameron Simon versus Caelan Loughran?
I think Caelan Loughran wins.
Yeah, I do too.
Probably devastating too.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I know sometimes I worry I'm too biased, but I think he's too strong and too powerful at this stage. He's been giving it loads on Instagram and on Twitter. He wants it. I'd love to see it. Maybe we will see it down the line. But look, nonetheless, Cameron Simon, fantastic prospect. He moves to 9-0, and it was something to build upon, a win to build upon, and it'll be exciting to see what's next for him. Jesus Aguilar was not going out there to get paid by the hour on Saturday night, Harry. A devastating overhand right on Shannon Ross. The thing that sticks out to me was the beautiful camera angle that we got to witness this on. It was like perfectly on point. Credit to the UFC production team for getting that angle. Devastating. We saw the pure devastation in the first camera angle, straight right down on the button. Boom, over the top, and it was all over before we knew it for Jesus Aguilar, who we've got to say he's been looking good. This is a kind of a standout performance for him. People are going to remember him after this, and it's a good win to build upon in a very talent-rich 125-pound division, Harry.
The first line of my notes was, I mean, what can we even say about that? That's literally the line in my note, right? Because what can we say? He storms out and the first shot he lands puts him away. Like, yeah. What I will say is I don't want to see Shannon Ross fighting in the UFC. Again, it seems like I think that's either the 3rd or the 4th straight finish for Shannon Ross. Please go and take some time. Protect your chin. Look after yourself, because if you're taking shots like that and reacting like that to those shots, something is going wrong. And I don't want to see him lace some gloves for a significant amount of time if he is going to stay in the UFC.
Absolutely. Yeah, very well said. Last but not least, Esteban Rivovic versus Camilla Kirk. Very good fight to kick us off here. Very entertaining. Look, a little bit loosey-goosey when it comes to the technique at time, but this really, we talk about great cards and the epitome of a great card. We always go from top to tail, and we could have almost went from the first fight to the last fight here, but obviously people want to hear what we think about the main event first. But this kind of set the bar for what a night it was going to be. Lots of kind of momentum shifts, a little bit of a comeback. In the end, it was Ribovic who got the win over Camilla Kirk. A very, very exciting fight. Ribovic moves to 12-1 after picking up the unanimous decision. Harry, any quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, I thought this was an absolutely amazing fight. This to me was a better fight than Hooker Turner, because it just had more, right? Like, I think the thing that we sometimes get away from or gravitate towards is we know the names of Turner and Hooker, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
so
very fair to say that.
When we watch them, they're like, oh my fuck, Jalen Turner's done or Dan Hooker's done a thing, and he's bleeding, and all this. Camuela Kirk versus Ribovic was an absolute banger. Like, there was technical ability, there was grappling, there was takedowns, there was reversals on the ground, there was submission attempts, there was blood, there was the comeback itself. Fantastic. I absolutely loved that fight. Brilliant.
You should have stuck it in. Yeah, by all means, stick it into the awards. Give it its due course.
Sure, you might be
right. Yeah. But that wraps us up. That brings us to the end of a very memorable card. Like I said, I was very looking forward to coming in here and breaking down this card. Tremendous showing of talent and grit and determination and great stories. UFC 290 was one for the books. It's one that we will remember for many years. Harry, as I always do on the balance breakdown, I'll leave it to you, good sir, to share some of your final thoughts on this card.
We need to cherish nights like this. We need to make sure that when it comes to nights like this, we understand what we are looking at. It's all well and good, and we do it often, to talk down on the UFC and to critique the UFC. But when the UFC puts in the time and puts in the effort to curate and produce a card like this, we have to, it's this that reminds us that this is why they are the apex promotion in mixed martial arts, is because you can put a card together that is bursting with storylines, that's bursting with fantastic performances, that's bursting with finishes, and it's bursting with just an unbelievable level of skill. And so it's moments like this that we must, absolutely must, give the UFC their full credit, and every single fighter on that card deserves their credit. It was a wonderful night of fights. One of the best nights of fights that I think I've seen in my time following MMA, and probably one of the best nights of fights we're going to see in a long, long, long time. Every fight delivered. It was a wonderful, wonderful night.
You can head over there and follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell, myself at O'Neill MMA on social media. We'll see you a little bit later on this week for the preview show. And as always, we'll be back with the balance breakdown next week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hit the like button, the subscribe button, tell a friend, and we'll see you the next time.